here in the book of Acts. The book of Acts is dealing with the Acts of the Apostles and things that they did after Christ ascended in Acts chapter 1. We see Acts chapter 2 was the time of Pentecost when the power of the Holy Spirit came upon them and they were able to. And some people look at it and say, "Oh, wow!" And you just talk about the day of Pentecost and the miracles that happened, and people get so focused on that. That's not what the power of God came upon them for. The power of God came upon them so that they could fulfill Acts chapter 1, verse number 8, where he says that you will be witnesses unto me in both Jerusalem, Judea, and the uttermost parts of Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. That's the power that we have, that we can be witnesses for Christ. So we're going to be in Acts chapter 27. To start off, like I said, we're going to kind of hit that just a little bit, but Acts 28 is going to be where we draw our text out of. And if you want to title this is my title. And sometimes I write down multiple titles in my book as I'm writing these things down. But Taylor Swift kind of got the best of me on this one, so this one, Shake It Off. All right, we're not going to play the song, so don't worry about that. But Shake It Off. So let me kind of give you some rundown of what's happening in chapter 27. In chapter 27, verses 14 through 20, the Apostle Paul is being shipped as a prisoner to Rome. He's already stood before the king. He's already done these things. He's already presented his cause. And they said, you know what, because you're a Roman citizen, what we're going to do is we're going to send you to Rome. And there, you're going to go before, the people that need to be, and you're going to present your cause and, see if you're going to continue to be a prisoner of the state, if you will. And so we see that in 14 through 20, he's put on a boat. This, not a plane, not a Greyhound bus. They ship prisoners by boat then. And so they're going across the water, and they're going from the east coast, or the west coast of Israel, and they're going to go across and going to go to Rome. So they're going back to Crete and stuff like that. So they're going across what we know as the Mediterranean Sea. And so they're going across, and the storm's out there, and it's a sea, right? How bad can it be, right? My dad used to be in the Navy back in the day, back in before my day. And he said that he was on an aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, not the Starship, but the aircraft carrier, okay? And some of you, the guys are like, yep, do y'all watch Star Trek? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so the USS Enterprise, not Starship. So, but anyway, and so he said that in the aircraft carrier is so long that you could take the Empire State Building and lay it down sideways on the deck of the Enterprise and still have room on both ends. That's huge. And it floats. That's what amazes me, right? Here's this thing out there. We look at it like, yeah, we see it with pictures, and it's in the open water, and it doesn't look very big. Like, how in the world do they land a plane on that? Well, imagine the Empire State Building's 120 stories tall. So imagine it's 120 stories long, okay? And it's huge. And to still have room on the ends, it's no wonder they can land planes on the thing. It's stinking long, right? And so here it is. They're out there in the middle of in the middle of this Mediterranean Sea. That's where my dad was stationed a lot. And he said that there were times that the storms would get so bad, you'd be laying in your bunk. And he says the waves would be so big you could feel it lifting. And he says, and then all of a sudden you'd hear this, and he's like, the propellers were coming out of the water. And he said when they come back down in the water, it would just shake the thing. You're talking the Empire State Building, waves so big that the back end of this thing was coming out of the water. That's huge. So when we talk about storms in the Mediterranean Sea, and I'm telling you, when you read the Bible, don't just dry read it. Read it and say, wow, this stuff's real life. So here they are, nothing compared to, the USS Enterprise. They got this, we're going to call it a boat now, right? And here they are on this boat with guards and prisoners, and they're out there, and it's being tossed this way and that way through 14 through 20, to the point that they're like, we're going to die. We're just going to die. And so they're starting, people are jumping overboard and everything. And Paul comes up and he's like, whoa, no. Don't do that. Now, here's these guards watching this prisoner, and this prisoner stands up and says, let me tell you what to do. All right? What's the chances of them following his lead? Oh, yeah, I see where this is going to go. But anyway, they do listen to him. And Paul says, don't do that. Don't let any more lives be lost. Matter of fact, quit throwing stuff over the board. We're going to make it. And you're the captain of what ship? The Jolly Roger? I don't think so, right? And so here they are, they're doing it. But they listen to him in 14 through 20. In verse number 31, you see where even Paul says it. Paul comes out and says this. He says, Paul says to the centurion to the soldiers, this is the guy in charge. He says, except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved. He's saying, which doesn't make sense to them because they're thinking, abandoned ship, we're going to float to the nearest place, right? And he's like, unless you stay in the ship, you're going to die. You need to stay in here. And then, lo and behold, the next verse says, and they listened to him. So much that they cut the ropes off of the lifeboats. This just makes so much maritime sense, doesn't it? Get rid of the lifeboats! We're about to die. What happens? Anyway, they end up being shipwrecked. They get to a point where they look ahead and they see land, and they see this little inlet, and everybody's like, just shoot for the inlet. We're going to beach this thing. And so they hoist up the sails and they get going full speed as fast as they can. And they ram this thing into the little junk there and just boom. And there it sits. Now they're shipwrecked. And it seems like, wow, this is really going good for the Apostle Paul, isn't it? Here he stands up for the cause of Christ. He gets arrested. He gets beaten. He gets thrown in prison. He has to go and, testify before multiple courts. And then he's still arrested. He doesn't get set free. Then they're going to ship him off to another country. And he gets out there and then he's in a storm and everybody's dying. And he's like, wow, can this get any worse? I'm glad you asked. Verses 20 through 44, we see that they beached the ship. And they're just kind of like, what are we going to do? It's stuck fast in verse number 41. And then it goes on. And the soldiers, in verse number 42, the soldiers gave counsel, and let's kill the prisoners. Because under the Roman law, if a prisoner escaped, you had to take on their punishment. You had to fulfill their sentence. So if their sentence was death, you can bet they're going to make sure they keep a hold of those prisoners, right? And so they're thinking, well, if they're dead, they can't escape. That makes perfect sense, right? Well, not quite. So the soldiers' gave counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, he'd already listened to Paul, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose and commanded that they which could should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. And the rest, some on board, some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they all escaped, all safe, to land. Didn't escape being a prisoner, but were safely on shore. So it's kind of like, wow, this is kind of like watching, Pirates of the Caribbean, right? You didn't know the Bible could come alive like that, right? And this is the way it happened. And if it couldn't get better or worse, whatever the case may be. Now we're going to go to chapter 28, and these are going to be our text verses that we're going to pull out, verses 1 through 6. And when they were escaped, when they were saved, when they got to land, then they knew that the island was called Melita. And the barbarous people, oh man, we're getting interesting, right? Because here's the barbarians of the island. The barbarians people showed us no little kindness, which means that they showed a lot of kindness. This is, So here they are, and you got to picture, you got to imagine this thing coming to life. These are real people. So they beach the ship, then they have to swim to land because it's, a little further out. So they get in land, and they're like, and they're just sopping wet, and just kind of like, totally exhausted. And then the barbarians come out of the woods. And so here they are, they're coming out of the woods, they got swords, who knows what they got. Anyway, they're coming, and the prisoners are like, wow, the Roman soldiers are saying that we're not going to die. This is great. And then here comes the natives. Oh, man, come on. Shipwreck, soldiers wanting to kill us, and now this. Can it get any worse? We're going to keep saying that phrase, probably. But next thing you know, they come up, and they show them kindness. Now they're sweating. Now, here's my mind. Why they're so nice to me. Well, the next phrase, it says, they showed them no little kindness, and they kindled a fire. Oh, now they're going to eat me. What's the fire for? What are you planning here? How come that pot's so big? That doesn't say that, but it's the Kinstead version. So it showed them, for they kindled a fire and received us every one because of the present rain and because it was cold. That's pretty cool. The fact that all these things are happening, all this stuff's going wrong, right? And then the natives are actually friendly to them and actually build them a fire because they're they're cold and they're wet and stuff. And so it's kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool. This is actually not so bad. Maybe a little bit on the survivor side, but it's still not so bad. So they start getting more wood and stuff together, and here's where Paul steps in. Verse number 3. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper or a snake out of the heat and fastened on his hand. This is getting cool. You can't write a movie script any better than this, right? So here he is. He's going out. He's gathering sticks around. They got a fire going, so he's like, hey, I'll help. So he goes out, and he gathers some sticks. He comes over to the fire. I wish I had a fire here. Not a real one, but a fake one. And so he drops the sticks on the fire, and when he does that, out comes this snake out of the fire, because it was cold, so more than likely he was dormant. And then he puts, I just thought it was a stick. and he puts it on the fire, the heat warms it up, the snake comes out, fastens on his hand. No, I'm not going to say that. All right, on we go. And when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hanging on his hand, they said to themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom, though he had escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffered him not to live. Verse number 5, and he shook off the beast in the fire and felt no harm. Howbeit, they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly, but after they had here's my mind, all right? Nobody tries to help him. What do? It's kind of like today, let me show you a picture of what it looked like if it was to happen today. I don't have anything on. So if you're in witness protection program, you don't have to worry. So he's sitting there. Basically, that's what happened. Nobody jumped up and said, hold on, I got a bite kit for that. Which they didn't at that time, but nobody tried to cut his hand off or anything like that. They're just like, spectators, right? Rubberneckers when there's an accident on the road. It's kind of like, let's watch and see how long he lives. So he shakes it off, and he felt no harm. Verse number 6 again. Howbeit they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down suddenly, but after they had looked a great while, still nobody wanted to help him, and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. Little g. Let's break this down a little bit. Okay, if we're not breaking it down enough already. Okay? But the fact is that here he was, all this time. Now, we got a picture of what's happening in his life. But let's break this down. Paul was still in the center of God's will when all this was going on. So now you can start applying this spiritually into our own lives and saying, okay, the title of this is Shake It Off. Here's a guy that's in the middle of God's will and everything is going against him. Some of us are jumping ahead and already applying it to our own lives, are we not? Let me kind of give you some things. In this journey, as if this beginning of this journey, this is just the beginning of the journey that he was about to be going on. As if this wasn't enough, we see these things happen. Verse number 1 is basically, they're like, whew, we made it. We survived this. Verse number 2 is like, well, things are looking up. The barbarians are, built us a fire. This is pretty good. Verse number 3, here's Paul. He's just doing his part. Instead of just sitting on the bench and, playing the super Christian apostle, and just sitting there, and just saying, okay, I'm just going to warm myself by the fire, which we know another apostle that did that. It didn't turn out too well for him, right? And he said, let me help. Let me go get some wood. I'm just doing my part. And in the first part of that verse, in the second part of that, in verse number 3, we see that things didn't go his way. It was a surprise attack, if you will. Verse number 4 is we've already kind of basically mentioned this. This is the spectators spectating. Right? That's what they're doing. They're just watching to see what's going on here. And then verse number 5, we see the amazing control of his emotions. Now, here's where I have to separate myself from the Apostle Paul, as I do so many times, but this is one of the occasions, because if it had been me, and a snake, first I would have tried to do the Matrix move, to avoid the snake, but if it would have latched onto me, yeah! Now, see, here's my weirdness, is snakes are very beautiful animals. Okay, they are. They're very beautiful behind glass. Right? If I can see them, in so many places that we live, we've actually had some that, like black snakes or stuff like that. I'll let them be, because they do their part. Just don't surprise me. If you surprise me, you're dead. I'm sorry. It's like you did your part, but now you went against the rules. All right? And so, in several of the houses we lived, it's kind of like, if there was a black snake, I'm like, that's good. Don't mess with that. That's a good one. Let it, scare it off if you wanted to get out of your way, but that's a good snake to have. All right? Because it protects you from other snakes. I don't like it eating my frogs, but nonetheless. And so, now there have been many times where I've walked up on snakes and stuff like that, and I've killed them. Now snakes do their part. I understand that in the great ecosystem that we have. But don't surprise me like that. So I'm with Paul with throwing that joker back in the fire. Maybe put a stick on it first, and then do it. It's kind of like, hey, what you good tonight, baby? But no, that's a good place for that snake to be. I understand that. I'm with Paul on that. But to sit there and just just a minor inconvenience, and then go about what he was doing. I don't register with that. I don't understand that. I mean, to go through everything that you've already gone through, and then to do this, it just doesn't make sense to me. So here's some things, and some things that he didn't do, and things that he did. So we're going to have two lists, if you will. Number one, that he didn't do. All right? Number one, he didn't sit down and quit. Matter of fact, the only way he can get to 2 Timothy and write the words, I have fought a good fight, I have finished the course, I have kept the faith, was that in Acts chapter 27, he just didn't sit down on a log and say, what? I'm done. I'm done with this. There's no way I'm continuing. How can this... I quit. All because of a surprise attack in his life. Now we're starting to pick that spiritual application up, aren't we? How many times in our life have we been surprised by the devil? Booyah! Right? I just surprised several of y'all. If you're on Facebook or if you're on Periscope and you just jumped out of off your couch, I'm so sorry for that. But that is the way the devil works. If the devil came to us, though, and he gave us advance warning, it's kind of like when you're watching a movie. And somebody's going to preach a message about this, at our previous church about, that we even played the scary music as I was walking towards the door, and I was giving the narrative. As she was alone, and she was walking towards the door, there was a sound from the other side. No one else was around, and it's kind of like, and all we do, there's a trailer out there right now, it's so freaky cool, about a lady that's going to the cellar door to open it up, and it's kind of like, you want to cry, don't open the door, why are you, and that's, if the devil did that to us, if the devil put a door in front of our house, which would be weird, but if you put a door in front of our house and said, with a title above it says, enter here for the devil to tempt you and stuff like that, then we'd avoid the door, right? Yeah. But he comes, he deceives us as an angel of light, and he comes and next thing you know, we're welcoming him in. It's like, wow, this is so great, this is awesome, this is such a wonderful thing in my life. I don't feel like it's wrong. Booyah! God's attacks of the devil. But when those things happen, regardless of what he uses or who he might use, these are no reasons for us to sit down and quit. But rather, what did he do? He didn't sit down and quit. What he did was he shook it off, and he continued to do what he was doing. And the key on this, let me kind of back up to give a late preface here, is that you got to remember, like I said a while ago, that Paul was in the middle of God's will. Now, if you can't continue what you were doing if you're not in God's will, please don't do that. Don't continue to be outside of God's will. Pull yourself back in that right relationship with God, and then you can continue doing what you're doing. So first thing is he didn't sit down and quit. He shook it off and continued doing what he was doing. Second thing is he didn't blame God. God, why did you let this snake bite me? This is your creature. You can command it to do whatever you want. Did you have to have it laying next to the stick that I was picking up? No, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to make it easy for me to grab a hold of. You didn't have to make it jump out of the fire. You could have just left it where it was. Why are you doing this to me? It's your fault. Wow. How many times do we as Christians, how many times do we do that? Yes. God, if you wouldn't make it so easy on me to do that. God, if you wouldn't make that sin, man, we could go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. God, and people say, well, if God knew man was going to sin, why in the world did he put the tree there to begin with? Which is a logical question, isn't it? Because obedience is better than sacrifice, to use God's words. God wants us to obey him, to show our love towards him. He showed his love towards us. And that while we were yet sinners, he still died for us. But God says, you know what? I want ones that are going to choose to. Yes, the birds obey him. The rocks, the trees, even that snake obeys him. We don't have to worry about creation not obeying him. How many times do we see testimony in the scriptures of Jesus walking on the water? And the water's just like holding his hands up as he's walking. That's kind of a weird picture, but it's kind of like, let me make this gelatized for you. And Jesus was able to walk in the water. How many times was he able to say, "Peace, be still," and the wind ceased and the waves ceased? How many times was he able to speak to even our life and bring people back to life with his spoken word? He has no problem with creation obeying the Creator, other than man. And when we obey him, it shows that we choose to love him. And so we can't blame God. He didn't blame God, but what did he do? Matter of fact, what he did do is all the same. All right, he shook it off and he continued because he was in the center of God's will. Third thing is that he didn't do. He didn't throw it on someone else, because here's what we would do. Right? And there's a snake flying through the air. And of course it's going to land on somebody's lap. And here we go, the Mississippi squirrel snake style. And it's going to cause chaos. Right? But he didn't throw it on somebody else.
I would have.
Wouldn't we all? Right? But he shook it off and he continued. You say, what's the spiritual application on that? You went ahead and gave us what he did do. What's the spiritual application on that? Because so many times I have this problem, we see this problem, and I minister with people and counsel with people, and here's what we do. Well, I do this because my mom and dad did this or that. I'm this way because so-and-so. How many times do we watch, 2020 or one of those other shows that have, that they talk about, a crime that happened, and they start interviewing the people in jail, and they're like, well, the reason I killed this person is because so-and-so beat me up when I was in middle school. No, you killed that person because you chose to do it, is what it boils down to. If you want to just hit brass tacks here, that's what happened. You chose to. And we can't blame other people for our sins. I keep referring back to this because it applies so much even to our daily lives. Adam and Eve. After, Eve's out there, she's tempted by the devil. She takes the fruit, she did eat. She gives it to her husband who did eat with her. And they consume this, whatever the fruit was. It doesn't say what it was. So they consume the fruit. And then God shows up. And God says, Adam, where are you? And they're hiding from God. And then he finally comes out, and he's like, what's going on? And we hid from you because we were naked. Who told you were naked? Well, the serpent that you gave me, right? This is how it pulls down to it. Let's bring it all the way down. Let's take it point by point. Adam is talking with God, because that's the line, and he has to give an account for the family. And so Adam's sitting there, and he's like, you know what? The woman which thou gavest me, she did give me, and I did eat. So it's not my fault. If anything, God, let's go to point number 2. It's your fault because you gave her to me. And thirdly, on point number 3, it's her fault because she gave me the fruit. If you read it, that's basically what he says. The woman that thou gavest me, she did give me and I did eat. When really he needs to focus at the last part of that verse and he'll get it right. I did eat. So God looks at Eve. Eve? The serpent did beguile me. He tricked me and it's his fault. Which really pulls it back to, because he's a created being, it's still your fault, God, point number 2. That he tricked me, point number 3. Now I'm throwing it on somebody else. Did we not do that? It's everybody else's fault except ours. But if we're going to be like the Apostle Paul, let's shake it off and continue to live in God's will. Number 4 is he didn't concentrate on the cause of the attack. He didn't concentrate on the snake. And this is what knocks a lot of Christians out. It's because so many times we get so focused on the sin in our life that we lose fact of the forgiveness of God of that sin. Even if it's sin that we've already confessed. We'll sit there and we'll mope and we'll pout and we will build ourselves a cocoon of guilt about something that we've done in our life. Yeah, I prayed and I asked God to forgive me for this, but everybody knows. Everybody knows what happened to me. Everybody knows what's going on in my life. It's all over Facebook. It's all over Twitter. It's all over. I wear it on my face. And sometimes, like the psalmist David said, he said, "My sin is ever before me." Sometimes you can't get away from the result of that sin. It's there. But you don't have to sit there and concentrate on the cause of the attack. Shake it off and continue to live in God's will. You say, why, Kim? Why should I do these things? Why? Because only then can you see what happens in verses 6 through 16. And I'll give them to you quickly. In verse number 6, we see the effects of other people's beliefs. Yeah, they thought he was a god. They looked at him and it changed their opinion on him. Okay, maybe he's not a murderer and all this. He's something else. Well, then they may not look at you as a god, but they may look at you as a child of God. Big G. And they can go on further. And then it goes on in verse number 8. There's actually healing that happens on the island. One of the bigwigs that lives on the other side, the big tiki man that lives on the other side of the island, that he has some family members that are sick. The next thing you know, they bring Paul over there. Paul goes over there and heals the family. Next thing you know, in verse number 9, it says that and they brought many people from the island that were diseased and infirm, and he healed them through the power of God. You see, if he would have concentrated on the attack and he would have blamed God and blamed others and blamed the snake and everything else, then the effects that he had on that island would never have been felt because he wouldn't have been in God's will any longer. Sometimes, you're going to get surprise attacked. Sometimes you're going to get bitten so hard it's just going to freak you out. But the thing that we need to do, and please don't take this as a moment of me saying, just let it go. All right? And I'm not saying that. But I'm saying shake it off and continue in God's will. Don't let it stop you. The Apostle Paul is an awesome testimony here of what God can do in our lives, everyday lives, when those surprise sin attacks happen. Let's continue to be in God's will. Shake it off and let it go.